Welcome to the Classical Commons Podcast, a conversation exploring the ideas, people, and trends in classical education. I'm Rob Jackson, founder of this digital platform. And today I have two guests, both founders of Liberty Common, a classical school in Colorado that I visited recently at their Festival of Ideas. It was founded in 1997 to meet the needs of Fort Collins families. And they discovered that something was missing in their local district school. So Dr. Randy Everett, a urologist who resides in Fort Collins, was part of a parent group that helped to found Liberty. And Bob Schaffer, a former state senator and U.S. congressman from Colorado, was involved in bringing charter laws to the state. They were both part of that founding group of families that led to Liberty Common. And so I'm going to ask that we kind of stroll down memory lane a little bit and reconstruct the history of Liberty Common. But thank you and welcome, Randy and Bob.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Liberty Common, again, it's quite an extraordinary story, and you both had a part to play in this. Could you tell us a little bit of how the two of you met and what got you interested in classical schooling?
We were both meeting with small groups of parents separately. And then my wife and I bought a half page of our local paper and put in an ad, and Bob came to that was one of the early meetings. And so early on we connected and started working together.
Yeah.
Not sure where. I'll add my part of it. Yeah, we were kind of in the south end of our town with a group of parents in our neighborhood upset with various things in our local neighborhood school, and so we came to the conclusion that we just complaining is not a good remedy for anything. So we started meeting, and then we found out that there was another group meeting in Dr. Everett's living room, and so a few of us went over there and got connected and realized our dissatisfaction with the direction of public education was very similar, and our hopes, although they weren't clearly defined early on, were similar in from a big picture similarity. We thought before we got to the point of what curriculum should we pursue, the bigger question was, should we insist that there be a curriculum in our schools? It was written down, things of that sort. So
yeah.
We had agreement on that. Well, then we spent a lot of time studying and working together and refining and with a number of families, but predicated on the notion that there should be a rigorous, well-defined curriculum, one with purpose and mission and intention, and then that parents should have choice in the kind of school that they attend, and that the management of the school should be local and site-based if possible. And then and with respect to the people who work in it, we came to the general agreement that those who work in a school like this ought to be treated like legitimate professionals, not subject to being trapped in a union wage scale, but treated as professionals based on merit and rewarded for the value added that they add to the organization and to the overall delivery of an educational program.
All of those features seem sort of commonsensical to, I think, most of us. So, but that wasn't common sense there in your local district. I mean, you were facing some headwinds as you even began to look into this. Yeah, go ahead, please, Randy, please.
They started trying to stamp us out immediately.
Huh.
But I had started meeting privately with the superintendent, who was fairly recently hired. And we got a long ways before the teachers union found out that he was meeting with a parent, which is verboten, of course. And so we had gone a long ways. The district found it actually hard to backpedal a little bit. And we were working many fronts, and Bob was key to working toward, he'd actually already the year before submitted a proposal for schools of choice, for basically for charter schools.
Right.
And we upped that game at the same time. And then history took a lot of twists and turns, but we got the district to approve our school even before we got the charter school bill that Bob was the principal author of, approved at the state level. And we actually had a school for several years before we were forced to charter, just to keep our school alive or our student body moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, these challenges, the difficulties that you faced are certainly not unheard of, although here we are 30 years hence, and we'll talk in a little bit about what the state of the nation, or the state in your case in Colorado, look like. But I want to back up just a bit and ask, did either of you have a classical background in this vision for what the school would become? Or did you essentially have to find your way to something that was, as you said a moment ago, Bob, coherent and systematic?
Well, for me, maybe to the extent that I didn't really know it. I for myself, I was educated in a Catholic Marianist high school in Cincinnati, went to Marianist University as well, and majored in political science, which involved a lot of political theory. Now, that's not necessarily the core of a K through 12 curriculum, but those elements were there. The same philosophers that the American founding fathers read and knew well were themselves educators and cared about education. And
right.
So I recognized the things that I thought were important for my kids in the direction we started pursuing. And that direction was Dr. E.D. Hirsch in the early days. He had just written, cultural literacy was not that old when we got started in this process, but we discovered that book. And Hirsch doesn't necessarily use the terms classical education in cultural literacy or even the schools we need. But that's what he was onto. And that is the core knowledge sequence aligns very nicely with what once we added a high school here, what we recognized and realized is a modern application of old schooling and old strategies and old ideas. And so I think when we started to deepen our enthusiasm for reviving a classical education, it was through what Hirsch had already concluded in those two major works, and then ultimately the curriculum that came through the Core Knowledge Foundation.
Mm-hmm. Randy, how about yourself?
Well, I did have a classical education, one might say, and my university studies, so I wanted to become a physician. But when it came time to apply for medical school, I had 180 hours of credit, but I had spent so much time in the classics that I lacked one more science course to actually graduate. But the medical school accepted me without a bachelor's degree, and I just transferred back one of my basic science classes and, graduated late. But as Bob said, the Hirsch core knowledge sequence played a founding role. But when we started things, it only went K through 6. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't long after that, as we were growing ourselves, and we planned only to grow till 8th grade, that we had, so many thousand parents on the waiting list wanting their children to get into our school, that one of the parents on the waiting list wanted to start a second school and to include a high school. And they came to me and said, Randy, we would like to have you design a classical curriculum. And I said, no problem. So I went ahead and put together the high school curriculum based on the classical idea. Mm-hmm. And so we already had a head start on how to take what Hirsch did and to integrate it into this bigger whole mm-hmm. of how the whole picture should look. and we did our homework as a group of parents. In the first year, maybe we should say by the second year, we had read together over 200 books.
Oh my goodness.
And so we had this background knowledge, this common foundation of knowledge out of which to piece together what works and why. And we slimmed that down into a very tight definition. And so fortunately for us, from very early on, having done our homework, we collectively, using each other's expertise, put together a really strong approach.
Randy, I was pleased in the very little bit of research that I was able to do in preparation, found a picture from the archive. Actually, it looks like that was probably lifted from the newspaper. And this is with your wife Ruth Ann and your children. What was the story behind this? What was the newspaper covering here?
Well, so at this time, this was before we had a charter law or a charter school, but I was already going all around the community, and because of that, got invited to go down to Denver as well, and became known for stirring up interest in a better way of doing things via a public school. And because of the controversies surrounding our early efforts as a group, I got interviewed, several times by people around the state.
Sure.
But one writer in particular with the Rocky Mountain News came and heard me talk, and he got excited, and he got his cameraman to come with him. And this picture, I'm pretty sure, was from 1992.
Yeah.
That was early on. And, but this was about families, and it was families just like this.
Yep.
That we were collecting interest from, who already knew, maybe because of older siblings, that what was before them wasn't quite what they had in mind.
Yeah. Was this journalist sympathetic? You said he got excited about the story.
He was definitely sympathetic.
Yeah.
And he was, a senior writer at the Rocky Mountain News, and
yep.
So they let him write what he wanted to write.
Well, so much of this has been captured on the Liberty Common website. You have a history page. Bob, you're there, of course, and you've been able to compile this because you were there from the beginning, but it's got a great timeline that folks can actually cycle through, taking us all the way back to that first couple of years in 1990, 92, and right on through to the present day. Are there any aspects of this, as you were talking about the work that you did with the district, Randy, as you were in conversations with the superintendent, any aspects of how things were unfolding where you were hoping and expecting that this might just kind of work smoothly to dovetail with what was already existing there in Fort Collins?
Well, like I mentioned, once the union found out, then there was total and complete opposition.
Huh.
They ended up firing the superintendent they had recently hired shortly after that, because he actually was willing to talk to the public. We did overcome intense, backstabbing and feet dragging, and it was essentially a miracle. But we got a school started, and then when they tried to shut us down because we were way too popular and had way too long of a waiting list, that's thank goodness the charter school legislation that Bob had passed by then a couple of years earlier,
Right.
A couple of years after we had actually opened our first school. Then we had a different route to protect ourselves, to prevent them from shutting us down, thanks to Bob.
Yeah. Bob, did you see this coming? That is to say, when you pursued those charter laws within the state, did you sort of suspect that there was going to be trouble unless you found an alternative path, or was it just coincidental?
Well, more options are always better. And so I think the reality is, for those of us down at the state capitol in Denver who were pursuing charter school laws, we were seeing something new in the United States emerge. The idea of charter schools and the strategy we'd researched successful models that had already been demonstrated in England and where charter schools are primarily vocational,
Right.
but they exist. And then Canada has I don't know if they call it charters, but they have a model that is similar. And so 2 other states had just recently passed charter school laws. California was Minnesota was the first state, and then California was number 2. And so we were tracking that, and we'd hoped to be right with them. Our first attempt didn't pass in the first year. And then so by the time we got our charter law passed, it was number 3 in the country. So I got to say, I was not necessarily pushing that legislation because of our efforts here in Fort Collins, but I was certainly being informed by our efforts here in Fort Collins to see how that anywhere in Colorado, if there are groups of parents or knowledgeable individuals or people who have the wherewithal to launch a charter school and they are confronted with a recalcitrant school district, that there should be a remedy in this charter school. Early on, let's call it a trend. Early on, or this new idea seemed like it was a good remedy that would empower parents, and that's exactly what we have here and what has developed over time.
The timeline reveals this, but your first school was not Liberty Common, but rather Washington Core Knowledge, and that was a grammar school to start with, as I recall. Is that right?
And not a charter, by the way. That was
not a charter. It was actually within the district, right, and authorized by the district initially. It was
at all of this time. So the charter school law was passing at the time we already had our school as an alternative school within the district. And what happened is I mentioned these bucolic little meetings in Dr. Everett's living room, but they got big. They got so big that we were renting space from the school district to rent some gymnasiums in elementary and junior high schools so that we could have town meetings. And so the district sees this, they see all this parental interest and leaders. I mean, I'm a state senator and I'm just the parent there. Dr. Everett was at the time was a bishop in the Latter-day Saints Church. And so, and there were others like us that were there. And so from the district standpoint, they see people with constituencies, big ones. And so now all this to say, our school was partly, for us, it was a great thing. It seemed like an answer to a miracle, or an answer to prayer, a big miracle almost. From their perspective, they saw a political movement occurring. They thought maybe we'd take over the whole district, which was never our intention. But I think the reason we got the school is because there was a condemned building that they were trying to offload, had a little asbestos problem, which they thought was perfect for us. And so they said, here's the building. You guys take that and you pretend you know what you're doing, and you can pretend to be school administrators there. And they were certain it would never work. Well, it only took a matter of weeks before they realized our waiting list was already huge. I mean, as I mentioned, we almost smile about it because we had a curriculum map. We had a curriculum plan. We could give to parents a beginning of the year to the end of the year map on what students were going to learn in each grade. And the district did not have that. So just that contrast. We can tell you what you're going to learn here. Made so many people wanted that. And so the number of kids in the school, we were full on day one. The number of kids in the school grew. And then we had this waiting list. So that's why, we didn't, not only did we hit the ground running, which we did, we clearly demonstrated and portrayed in the community to the district that there was a high demand for this kind of education, and that we were, our fuel tank was filled with rocket fuel. Yeah.
Well, I mean, at that point, conceivably, the district could have pivoted, could have said, "All right, this is our school. We've got waiting lists of parents ready to get into this school. Why don't we get in there and see what they're doing, what they've proposed? As you say, it's very evident. We have a curriculum, we have a scope and sequence. Folks know what their kids are going to learn. Was there ever any rapprochement with the district again, or was that the crossing of the Rubicon, as they say? They were done with you after they realized you had something they didn't.
That was the crossing of the Rubicon. And I mentioned the homework that we as a founding group of parents did. We were so much more knowledgeable about the history of different approaches to education. And we were so articulate about what we wanted to do and why. And they had no one, their director of curriculum, she didn't dare talk in public with us because we could explain things in a convincing way and she couldn't explain things at all.
Yeah. It's striking to think, and this is 30 years ago, that educationists, even at that time, were effectively offering a bureaucracy, a system, right?
That's what they were offering.
Right? And that they really couldn't respond, given their categories, given the work that they'd been trained to do, to a group of parents who were well-read, who were well-versed in those approaches that you described, and had decided this is what we want. And it was as though the professionals just simply couldn't, that didn't compute for them. Were there any? Pray God there were some. Were there some who found themselves, like that superintendent, sympathetic to the work you were doing?
Yes, thank goodness. And a few of those quietly behind the scenes offered us tip-offs and help and forewarnings. Bob, nicely referred to me as George Washington. I recently read an article that said, how did George Washington win the Revolutionary War? And then the answer was his spy network.
Yeah, that's right.
We had a spy network because what we said rang true.
Yeah,
it rang true to some of those open to hear, just like it did to virtually all of the parents who heard.
Right. Well, and they kept coming. They came in droves, your waiting list down the street, and this didn't put you in good stead with the district. So at what point did you have to just decide we've got to try another way because it's not going to work in the current configuration? What was the sort of deciding factor for you all to break and start a charter?
Yeah, well, in 1995 and 1996, that was the 95-96 school year, I think. No, it was a year before that. 94-95 school year, the district announced to us that this alternative school, the experiment was going to end. That they were going to, because we had building level autonomy. We had our own board. We decided who our headmaster was going to be, and they decided that was going to end. They also started assigning to us what they call tenured excess teachers. So we wanted to hire, of course, teachers who knew the curriculum and were classically oriented and were enthusiastic about what we were teaching. But the district had another problem, and that was unionized teachers that other principals didn't want. And so they would assign those tenured excess teachers to us, and they didn't care. They knew that they had a couple of years till retirement, and so they just needed their job to keep their state pension funded, and we were getting more and more of these inserted into the school by the district, and then they just announced that they're going to be done with this. Well, they picked the wrong year for this because that was the year 1994 when the charter school law was moving forward and was going to, they didn't think it was going to pass, but I knew we had the votes barely. It only passed by one vote. The charter school law in Colorado passed by one vote at every juncture. One vote out of the Senate, out of the Education Committee, one vote off the Senate floor, one vote off the House floor, and then the governor, who had kind of changed his mind year to year, and then announced that he was going to sign it. So it was a close call all the way, but we knew it was going to pass. I did. Several of us.
I
Several
did
of us
too.
working on it did. Anyway, it did pass. That caught the district by surprise. They didn't think that was going to occur. And so we announced, well, we've got a charter option now. And the interesting thing, which we started to pursue, but the interesting thing is the district now realized the governor's signature was on the law. We were working in that direction. They came to us and said, don't do the crazy charter thing. We are, in fact, now we see it differently. We're building a new school for a neighborhood south of town that, as you would a normal part of a new development. And they said, we'll give you that school if you just move there and don't do the charter. And what the district didn't understand is that we had enough families in the school and on the waiting list that we could say, we'll take that other school you're going to give us and run it as a district school. And we're going to charter because we have enough families to do both.
You're pretty.
And both schools did open.
Yeah, that's right. I this photo goes back to '97, and this, of course, is the charter. You've got a 5-year charter. Is this the signing? Who's present here for this one?
That's the ribbon cutting, and that's Bill Owens, who was not governor yet. Wait a minute. Was he?
I think by then he was.
Of Colorado, but when he was in the state Senate, Dr. Everett gives me a lot of credit. I appreciate that. But that was Senator Bill Owens was the architect of the charter school law that passed that year. I was a co-sponsor and right there with him the whole way. But he was the one who did the heaviest lifting on getting that charter school law passed. And so he became governor, and he came up to Fort Collins and helped us cut the ribbon and open the school. And that's my daughter there, by the way.
Oh, is this your daughter?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, not that.
No, the little girl. In the picture.
Oh, right.
The little girl in the picture.
Got it. Is it true then that with that charter in hand, you were essentially set free to run the school and to operate within the purview, right, of that charter, and to offer the full suite that you had intended, right, for Liberty Common?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah. What then? I mean, was it fair sailing from there, or did you continue to sort of have those who were taking shots at you and attempting to undermine you? What happened after '97?
It's a very long, painful story, but they shot at us every chance they got. For example, after they approved the charter, the school board sued those of us who were on the board of directors by name with financial consequences in district court.
On what grounds?
Yeah, I can't even remember because they were unfounded.
Yeah, they were challenging the validity of the charter school law itself. Using you all as the test case, effectively. Yeah, it named many of the founders. Dr. Everett and my wife Maureen were on the committee, the parent committee that launched the charter application. And what had happened is the district had voted it down, and we appealed that decision to the State Board of Education, which is a provision in the law. And they sued us and the State Board of Education in order to try to nullify the charter school law, the appeals process in the charter school law. And it was.
And they did it just hours before the appeal started.
Yes.
So it caused great havoc at the state level.
Sure. It was a delay tactic, partially, and it worked because they ran out the clock in the first year of our application, and it made it push the dates out too far that we couldn't get a school open. So we regrouped and applied for a new charter with all the lessons we had learned. And on the second attempt, we knew all the weaknesses in the law. We accommodated for them, and the second time through, it was a stronger application, and they still wanted to say no. They still fought us, but we got it approved.
And then opened Liberty Common in the fall of 1997. Is that right?
Yes,
that's right. So if you want to look at the string of miracles, we had it approved, but they stipulated size and start dates. So we had to open a school for 600 students in 3 months. But we found an ally locally, the CEO of a prominent construction firm throughout the state, who said, yeah, go ahead and buy that toothpaste factory. And my company and we will turn it into a school within the 90 days that we have. And they did it. And we opened
the toothpaste factory.
And more than that, he ran 3 shifts, so they're building around the clock, and we were not paying him back. We were out scavenging money and trying to borrow and put together as much as we could. But he floated us essentially a huge loan until we got the students in and the cash flow flowing so that we could pay him back. It was an enormous risk. I mean, he went out and borrowed money to build this for the project.
Several $million
on his credit. Knowing just faith in us and faith in the mission that we would get students, the school would be full, and that we would have the cash flow to make him whole, which we did. And there's another aspect of that. I mean, many of us, there was no real history of charter school financing yet because charters were so new. And we had to come up with a lot of money fast. So there were some big contributions and some loans that many made. There's no doubt about that. But there was a sizable number of families that used the equity in their own personal homes to secure the loan that we needed to buy the school. And so, the Everetts and Schaffers were on that list. And I got to tell you, in terms of the attitude, the things you saw when you were here, I like to say this to visitors because our names are on a little plaque in the front of the campus here.
Sure.
Nobody looks at it; they walk past it, but it's there. And I point that out and say, this explains the character and the attitude of the school. If the cost of failure is that a bunch of us go homeless, well, I can tell you, we will do anything to make sure the school is a success. And it was never a question. The school was a success from the day we cut the ribbon and opened the doors.
I got to tell you, it reminds me of things I've only read about, but we're all familiar with the old-fashioned barn raising, right? This community at Fort Collins really rallied, and you didn't raise a barn, you raised a school, and you did it together and collectively. It's just really miraculous, incredible. 25 years later, as you look back in the retrospective, in the rear view, what are some lessons learned? What are some lessons learned from Liberty Common?
Well, so one is if you have a well thought out, integrated plan for teaching a common base of knowledge, and you also address teaching morals, you have a set of common virtues that you teach, and if you're just sensible, and this gets into what classical education does, it teaches how to take a big view of the history of the world to understand what the underlying successful assumptions are, and being able to perceive what the unsuccessful assumptions of other people are. If you do those things, those common things, you can get uncommon results.
Yeah. And that's so well said, Dr. Everett, so well said. And I wonder, in terms of the uncommon results, really the extraordinary results that you've witnessed, how that permeates the community in ways that create a kind of healthy spirit. Because, of course, what you're describing of a curriculum that coheres, of a sequence that helps students to see the whole as well as the individual subjects, that all makes sense. But there's something about the spirit of what you're describing at Liberty Common that really, I mean, I witnessed it myself. I've been there a handful of times now. How do you sustain a healthy community? How do you keep people kind of rowing in the same direction, recognizing that this is our purpose, this is our mission? What do you do consciously, day in and day out, to sustain that esprit de corps?
You mentioned communication. I mean, the first thing you've got to do is try to is make that effort. And I find that the more we communicate with our families in our weekly newsletters and other publications, we hold lectures and so on. The more we communicate with parents about the curriculum, what should a child in America know at what age? If the conversation is on the main thing, it's motivating, and it's an empowering conversation. And regrettably, it's a unique conversation in most places. When you think for our local school district or any big public school district, when their board members meet and have a meeting about, just the regular monthly or biweekly meetings, the conversation is rarely about what a child should learn in that district. It's all about the teacher union contract. It's all about the mechanics of the school. And I'm somewhat sympathetic to that, because my goodness, the regulatory empire that is surrounding schools, I mean, it has an effect on us too. It's a big challenge. Sure. But I find that for regular public institutions, just complying with laws and making sure that they've got all the people in place to comply with new federal laws and new state laws and new local laws, they have to do it, but in every instance, it's a distraction from the main thing. And so I guess the point is at a charter school, I'm accountable to our parents on our parent board, and they care about the main thing. So we communicate that with them. We communicate that with all of the parents, and we want our parents to be knowledgeable themselves. And why Latin instruction at a young age, for example, why we care so much about penmanship, why we think reliance upon screens and keyboard should be delayed to an appropriate age, why we think great books are superior and ought to be reinforced over modern popular books and things of that sort, why the stories we choose are the stories we have. When we engage parents in those conversations, there is an elevation of enthusiasm and buy-in in the school, and it keeps all the faculty and staff on the right track too. So there are several ways I could answer that question, but I think that really is the main thing. We have to be about the curriculum and what we expect our children to know in every grade, scaled with an entire there's a great advantage, I think, of having a K through 12 curriculum continuum, because that means I've got a high school physics teacher, for example, working with kindergarten instructors and all instructors all the way through, so that those kindergarten, first, second, and third grade science lessons have a purpose, and that is to support those kids when they get in a really difficult honors level physics class, which we expect of all of our high schoolers, that they have the background knowledge and the elements in order to succeed and go on in life from there.
Yeah. Well, you've obviously done some remarkable work at Liberty Common, and it's now come to the attention of folks more broadly in the country. I have on the screen, for those of our audience who are simply listening, a report from the Independence Institute that was produced back in 21, I believe it is. What did you see as you read through this report? You had the investigators visit Ross Ezert, a senior fellow over there. What did you see? What did he see and report back that might have either surprised you or brought you some sense of satisfaction? Right? That I think we've got it right. I think he nailed it. I think he captured the essence of what we're doing here. What was in the report? Yeah.
The theme of the report is consistency, is similar to what I just mentioned in keeping our parents engaged, and that is consistency and repetition and reinforcement throughout the school for the curriculum. Our board, our founders like Dr. Everett and others, laid this out in terms of a vision 27 years ago, but it was really wonderful for an outsider to come in and say within the first paragraphs what were the stated intentions of our initial school policy so long ago. And that is, everything in the school should reinforce the curriculum. From how we organize students, even how they walk down the hall, to the things they see on the wall. All the artworks are reflective of some aspect of what they're learning in their classroom. the character development and the character education all aligns with the stories that they read and can be reinforced year after year. And so that was, and then everyone's on message, no matter which administrator or teacher Mr. Izzard spoke with. They were aligned in their professional communication about their craft and what they do in such a profound way that, I'm immersed in it every day because I'm here. But when an outsider comes in and says, man, this is what is so different about this place.
Yeah.
And I got to think to myself, all right, I didn't start working here until 2009, but it just made me proud that, when I got here, I did I think what makes sense. You open up your policy and procedures and find out what are we supposed to do. And there are the instructions from Dr. Everett from decades ago. And so I guess the point is that consistency of curriculum, reinforcement of curriculum, and everything we do with our students to elevate the goals of the classroom. That defines the school, and all of the distractions from that have been pushed out.
Yeah. Dr. Everett, was there anything in there, as a founding board member, you had to have read that with some satisfaction, but was there anything in there that surprised you?
Not that surprised me, but it was nice that he realized what Bob just explained. And let me just refer to one other thing. We have a parent manual.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's about 50 pages long. In it, so parents, they're enthused because their kids love going to school and come back and start telling them about all these cool things that they're learning. And they already, were hopeful because they put their kid on the waiting list. But they grow in interest. But when they start going through this parent manual, they start realizing the coherence. What they've heard is connecting with what they see in their children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's articulated. And pretty soon they become articulate in, first of all, of course, understanding, and then in being able to explain to other parents or individuals why this seems to all come together.
Yeah.
And it does come together. So just to explain one thing that comes together that I'm particularly fond of, proud of, is we have identified classical education in a simple construct that makes more sense than you can imagine.
Yeah.
And it's 4 steps. First you have to know something. And once you start knowing and gathering more and more knowledge, you start appreciating the connections within that knowledge.
Mm.
You start seeing the patterns, which you can't see if you don't know enough. And after you start to understand those patterns, then you can start to play with and project and hypothesize if your patterns and knowledge are correct by applying them to novel situations.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get good at that, then you have the foundation for problem solving, for creative endeavors.
Mm-hmm.
And those 4 steps, they can be talked about for quite a while. This is a dear memory to me. So Hirsch, early on, once they started having national meetings, he invited me to give 3 one-hour lectures in sequence that explain this thinking framework. Now, what I just said is as old as the hills. It didn't come from me.
Right.
I'm not the one who thought it up. You can find it throughout the ancient world.
Sure.
You can find it in the medieval world. And fortunately, you can find it again now.
Mm.
But parents, when they read that and they read the rest of the manual and they see what's happening, they realize that that's what's happening. Yeah. They realize that the things that they know well and do in their life or professional life follows that same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things pull together the multitude of small things that we intentionally wove together.
Yeah.
And when people realize this is a beautiful tapestry,
Mm.
I see how the angle of light, refines what I see and opens up connections because it's a work of art.
Yeah.
And I think we accomplished that.
I think that's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. It is indeed a work of art. I've seen this community in action. I've watched and been privy to parents and conversations that I've overheard at your Festival of Ideas with their children, with their, these are your students, but they're also talking to faculty at a level that just seems so deeply engaged with this tradition that everyone, as you said earlier, Bob, everyone is pointing in the same direction. We're moving together in the same direction. Very much reminds me, I'm sure reminds you all, of that Aristotelian notion of friendship. There's a real sense of friendship because we together are pursuing something in common, something higher than us that we pursue in a common cause for the common good. And it's palpable at Liberty Common. I want to make sure that we put on the screen, and we'll put show notes up, but you mentioned the parent handbook, Dr. Everett, and I think that, of course, is just one of literally a bevy of resources that you put together now over the last couple of years with the support of the Daniels Fund to create something of a toolbox for other schools. So you're sort of opening the veil, as it were, to reveal what you've done at Liberty. Bob, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what can be found in this Give Me Liberty how-to guide?
Sure. The president of the Daniels Fund board called me 3 or 4 years ago and was asking about replicating the school. Can it be replicated? I said, of course it can. He asked, could you replicate it in Denver, which is where the Daniels Fund is headquartered? I said, yeah, absolutely could. And then he said, well, would you all help us? Would you do that? And I said, no. He said he was crushed, wanted to know why. And I said, well, part of the beauty of the school is we're focused on the school. And secondly, and I hope everybody hears this. It's not a likely proposition that some group of people can go into somebody else's community and start a good school for their kids. Mm-hmm. We've discovered and really believe that the buy-in from parents, the leadership from parents is essential. So everything we've been celebrating and bragging and talking about is because we're talking about our children and now our grandchildren. And it takes, so that is an important element in the character of the school. So going to Denver or any other town and trying to duplicate the school, it might work, but it probably won't. And so that was the message. And then he asked, well, what suggestion do you have? And I said, well, how about this? I said, how about you give us a grant? I'll take a teacher out of the classroom. So it turned out to be a history teacher, and we will codify and archive and memorialize everything we do here and put it on a virtual shelf so that anyone in the world can come to that tool and that platform and use either a document or two or an idea or two or the whole thing. And it's designed in such a way that whether it's a bus schedule or the lunchroom schedule, or whether it's the curriculum, or whether it is all of the startup documents that we have in our actual charter, you can take the name Liberty Common School out, insert the name of your school, customize it, but all of it is there. And so the point is this is a public school. We receive public funds. There's no proprietary information, therefore, that we have. It is all publicly derived, and we believe it ought to be in the public domain. And the purpose of Colorado's charter school law is to have lots of examples, and that the best ones rise to the top and can be replicated. So all of the tools to replicate a great school are there. And the Daniels Fund paid for that whole process to take place, and we update it from time to time. And so you just go to our website, and right in one of the fields, you'll find Give Me Liberty.
That's right.
And you too can have liberty anywhere in the world.
That's right.
There are There are lots. There are well over 100 schools that have used either all or part of this template to launch their own charter schools and private schools.
Yep. Well, it's remarkable, but as you just said, Bob, and I think rightly so, the crucial element is not only having those resources, but having the people who can bring that together, and the parents specifically who have buy-in. And so as both of you reflect on more than 30 years of this striving for excellence that you have embodied in Liberty Common, what advice would you then share with parents, with school leaders, and with teachers who really want to pursue K-12 classical? What sort of parting words of wisdom do you have for us?
Well, so yeah, I would start off by saying, own it. That's how we became successful. We started off by, we happened to have already read Hirsch. So we started reading a lot of other things, and we discovered other good sources, and we identified sources that were absolutely worthless, however popular they were in the departments of education of so many failed universities in the United States, some of which esteem themselves rather highly. So if you own it and you're willing, it goes back to the founding. So, these men and women pledged their sacred honor. They put their own livelihoods at risk. When you own a thing, you're careful about doing it right. And somehow, there's a good thing about people, which that's behind why we don't do it for people. They need to own it. There needs to be a basis of parents willing to own it, but to engage others, because it takes a lot of people to have success at the level that we have enjoyed. Yeah. It takes welcoming people, and there's sometimes a bit of friction, but it's never been harmful friction. Hormesis. In the principle of hormesis is that it is in the experience of resistance or difficulty that you get better and stronger at a thing. We grow.
Yes. So. Yep. And Bob?
Yes. So the biggest lesson takeaway, I think, is that there's nothing easy about starting a school, especially if it's a public school. I mean, public funds have public accountability, and the districts and the state are correct to want to scrutinize every dollar you spend and make sure that the school is going to be open to everybody, for example, and is actually going to serve the community. Those are the right impulses. The bureaucratic nature of many people in public policy, unfortunately, does not lend itself to the some key elements that we've discussed here today. Treating teachers like real professionals. That's not easy to do when there's a union out there that wants to come in and organize teachers so that they're all treated the same. Having a curriculum that is outside, that aspires to be something bigger and outside of the state standardized curriculum and the assessments. Those things are all hard. We're obviously working against some inertia in public education land and in the bureaucracy of it all. So there's nothing easy about it. And I find often that when I consult with other schools, there's some parents who are excited right now because their kid's in the first or second or third grade. And then somehow they vanish a few years later after they got their school started. And then you've got a rudderless institution. And so it's hard. Hard things usually need to be codified and written down. Policies need to be written in such a clear and precise way that 10 years from now, it reduces the likelihood that things will be misinterpreted. And then you just can't, we're talking about, this is the biggest industry in America. If you look at where the public funds generally go, this is where the money is in public education. It's squandered, it's wasted, there's fraud, there's abuse. And think of what you're trying to do. You're trying to carve a little piece of that in a sane way for your children to deliver what is really intended. And there's nothing easy about that. It is really, really difficult to do education correctly and properly. And so if you do it right, you will have enemies and people will come at you. For 27, here we are 30 years later, they're still coming after us. So the point is, if it's important, you must fight for it. And there is no end to the fighting for that good thing. And as long as you're using public funds. And so that you just have to resolve yourself that this is hard and it always will be. But it's only my daughters and my son and their kids. And so when you put it in the proper context, I can fight 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for that. And we're surrounded. We've managed to collect a lot of people who have exactly that attitude. Finally, I would say this. This is a public institution. There's no doubt in my mind, and Dr. Everett, I know will agree. There's no doubt in my mind that we've seen the hand of God at work in history. I mean, there are decisions that have been made. There have been successes that have been made. There have been lawyers that have vanished. Angry parents that could have taken us down maybe, and they disappear. And there's no explanation for how that happens other than we were praying in and among ourselves. So, and, for a country, we're living in a country that, and we aspire to educate young Americans, living in a country whose motto is "In God We Trust." It's not a bad idea to trust in God. And so we have, and we do, and we talk about this. And we're in different faiths, even Randy and I, and lots of other people who've been around our table. But it was a frequent thing when we had an impasse and it wasn't exactly clear what the next steps forward ought to be. We took it to prayer and managed to choose a direction that served our children well and served our community well, and I think in the end served our country well. So so even if you're in the public domain, do like the founders did and appeal to the Almighty for the rectitude of your intentions. You cannot go wrong if you do that.
Amen to that. And I have to say, Headmaster Schaffer, it seems as though that political philosophy degree has come in pretty handy for you. I think you've accomplished a good bit under your watch. And Dr. Everett, as a physician, I believe the work you've done in supporting Liberty Common has really brought healing, truly healing to the institution of education, at least there in Fort Collins and under the banner of Liberty Common. So thanks to both of you gentlemen for your time, for retelling the story, and for the continued success and support of Liberty Common. I pray God blesses you and continues to see it flourish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us weekly on the Classical Commons podcast for updates on this renaissance in classical liberal arts education. Subscribe to our podcast and sign up for our bi-monthly newsletter.